Before praying, let us read a gentle summary of Psalm 30. The psalmist remembers a season when his soul felt pulled from deep waters of trouble. He speaks to God with gratitude, saying that the Lord lifted him up when despair tried to swallow him. Enemies did not get the final word. Instead, God turned toward him with mercy. For a moment there had been fear, discipline, and tears, yet the heart of the psalm declares a quiet promise. Weeping may stay for the night, but joy arrives with the morning. And the writer recalls crying for help and discovering that God listens more tenderly than we expect. Even when life feels fragile and uncertain, the Lord is near, ready to restore breath, strength, and hope. There are mornings when the soul wakes slowly, still carrying the heaviness of yesterday. Perhaps you have known nights when thoughts would not rest, when worry or grief sat beside you in the darkness. Psalm 30 gently reminds us that night is not the final chapter. The darkness can feel long, and tears can feel endless. Yet God's story for us does not end in sorrow. The psalmist does not pretend the pain never existed. Instead, he remembers it honestly. He remembers crying out. He remembers feeling weak and uncertain. Yet when he looks back, he sees something beautiful. God was already working within the night. Quietly, patiently, faithfully, the Lord was preparing the morning. This is one of the soft miracles of faith. Sometimes healing begins long before we recognize it. While our eyes are still wet with tears, God is already moving gently through the hidden spaces of our lives. The psalmist once believed his life stood firm and unshakable, but when difficulty arrived, he discovered how deeply he needed God's presence. That discovery, though painful at first, became a doorway to deeper trust. When he cried out for mercy, the Lord did not turn away. Instead, God transformed mourning into dancing, silence into praise, and despair into gratitude. The night that once seemed endless slowly gave way to a new dawn. In our own lives, we often expect healing to come suddenly and dramatically. Yet Psalm 30 invites us into a quieter understanding. Sometimes the Lord heals us the way morning heals the night. The darkness does not disappear instantly. Instead, the first light slowly appears along the horizon. The air changes, the colors soften, shadows lose their power. In the same way, God's comfort often enters our lives gently. A small peace appears in the middle of our worry. A moment of strength rises inside our weakness. A quiet hope whispers that the story is not finished yet. If you are carrying sorrow today, this psalm offers a tender reassurance. God sees the nights you endure. He hears the prayers that feel too fragile to speak aloud. Even when you feel alone, heaven is not distant. The Lord listens with compassion deeper than we can measure. And though tears may visit the night, they do not stay forever. Morning is already on its way, even if you cannot see the light yet. So as we begin this reflection together, breathe slowly and allow your heart to rest. Imagine the first light of dawn touching a quiet landscape. The long night is ending. God is still near. The one who lifted the psalmist from sorrow is the same God who gently walks beside you now. In his time, healing will rise like morning sunlight, and your heart will once again learn the language of joy. There are moments in life when the night seems to linger longer than we hoped. The quiet hours stretch on, and the heart grows tired of waiting for relief. In those moments, Psalm 30 speaks softly to us like a companion sitting beside us in the dark. It reminds us that sorrow is not permanent. The psalmist experienced deep trouble, yet he discovered that God's compassion was greater than the pain surrounding him. This gentle truth becomes a light for our own journey. The Lord's faithfulness does not disappear when life becomes difficult. Instead, his presence often becomes even closer when we feel the most fragile. When we reflect on the words "weeping may last for the night, but joy comes in the morning," we are invited to see life through the eyes of hope. Night represents those seasons when we feel uncertain, wounded, or discouraged. It may be a season of illness, disappointment, loneliness, or loss. During such times, our hearts may whisper questions we cannot easily answer. We may wonder why certain hardships have come, or how long the struggle will remain. Yet the beauty of this psalm is that it does not deny these emotions. It allows space for tears while still pointing us gently toward the promise of restoration. God never asks us to pretend that pain does not exist. Instead, He welcomes honesty. The psalmist cried out with a real voice and a real heart. He did not hide his fear or his weakness, and because of that honesty, he experienced the comfort of God in a deeper way. This teaches us something very important for our own spiritual lives. Healing often begins when we bring our true feelings before the Lord. When we speak openly in prayer, when we whisper our worries to God, we create space for His peace to enter our hearts. Sometimes we imagine that faith means always feeling strong, but Psalm 30 reveals a different picture. Faith is not the absence of tears. Faith is the quiet trust that God is still present while the tears fall. The psalmist remembered a time when he believed his life would never be shaken. Yet when challenges came, he realized how deeply he needed God's sustaining grace. Instead of destroying his faith, that realization strengthened it. He learned that human strength can fade, but God's mercy remains steady and unchanging. Think about how the morning arrives in the natural world. The sun does not rush into the sky all at once. Instead, it rises gradually. The horizon begins to glow softly. Darkness retreats step by step until the landscape is filled with light. God often works in our lives in the same gentle way. Healing may come slowly, but it comes faithfully. One small encouragement, one answered prayer, one moment of unexpected peace can become the beginning of a new dawn in the soul. This psalm also reminds us that gratitude has a powerful place in our healing. When the psalmist remembered how God rescued him, his heart overflowed with praise. Gratitude does not erase the memory of suffering, but it transforms the way we carry that memory. Instead of seeing only the pain, we begin to notice the quiet ways God was guiding us through it. We recognize the strength we did not know we had and the comfort that appeared just when we needed it. Perhaps you are still in the night of your own story. If so, be gentle with yourself. The journey through darkness can be exhausting, and it is natural to feel weary along the way. But Psalm 30 invites you to hold on to a quiet assurance. The morning has not been cancelled. God has not forgotten you. Even when the sky still appears dark, the light is already moving closer. As you sit with these words, imagine the calm of early dawn. The world is still quiet, and the first rays of sunlight begin to touch the earth. In the same way, God's presence is already touching your life. The sorrow of the night will not last forever. In time, the Lord will lift your heart, and joy will return like the gentle warmth of the morning sun. There is a quiet moment just before the morning fully arrives, when the world is still and the light is only beginning to touch the sky. This gentle hour reminds us of the promise hidden inside Psalm 30. The night may have carried tears, worries, or silent struggles, yet God does not allow sorrow to have the final voice. In the stillness of prayer, we discover that our hearts are not alone. The Lord listens patiently, like a loving Father who understands every fragile feeling we carry. Even when words come slowly, God receives them with kindness. Let us bring our hearts into prayer together. Heavenly Father, we come before you with humble spirits. Some of us arrive with gratitude, while others come carrying the weight of long nights and tired hearts. Lord, you see every tear that has been shed in the quiet places of our lives. You understand the fears we rarely speak and the burdens we sometimes try to carry alone. Today we gently place those worries into your hands. You are the God who lifts the soul from deep waters, the one who restores strength when our spirit feels weak. Lord, teach us to trust the promise that joy will come with the morning. When the night feels long and the answers seem distant, help our hearts remain steady in your love. Remind us that your mercy is greater than our anxiety and that your plans are kinder than our fears. Just as the sun rises faithfully each day, let your peace rise within our hearts. Replace the shadows of discouragement with the quiet light of hope. We also speak gentle declarations of faith over our lives today. We declare that God is near to the weary heart. We declare that sorrow will not define our story forever. We declare that the Lord is working even in the places we cannot yet understand. Every tear placed into God's care becomes a seed of healing. Every prayer whispered in faith becomes a doorway for grace to enter. Father, breathe new strength into those who feel exhausted, comfort those who are grieving, guide those who feel uncertain about the path ahead. In moments when we are tempted to lose hope, remind us of your faithful presence. You have carried many before us through their darkest nights, and you will carry us as well. Thank you for being the God who turns mourning into dancing and silence into praise. Thank you for the promise that joy will return like the morning sun after a long night. We place our trust in you today, believing that your love is already moving gently through our lives. And as the new day begins, we open our hearts to receive your healing peace. May your presence calm our thoughts, strengthen our spirits, and guide our steps. No matter what the day brings, we remember that you are walking beside us. There are seasons when life feels like a long night that refuses to end. The heart becomes tired from carrying silent burdens, and the mind searches for signs that hope is still alive. Psalm 30 gently reminds us that even when the night feels heavy, God is still present within it. The darkness may surround us, but it cannot remove the promise of morning. In the quiet hours of life, when answers seem slow to arrive, the Lord continues working in ways we cannot yet see. Often our deepest struggles happen in places no one else notices. A person may appear calm on the outside, while their heart quietly wrestles with worry, regret, or sorrow. God understands these hidden battles better than anyone. He sees the tears that never reach the public eye. He hears the prayers whispered softly into the silence of the night. Psalm 30 reveals a God who does not stand far away from human pain. Instead, he draws near to those who call upon him with honest hearts. The psalmist once believed that life would remain steady and secure forever. Yet when difficulty arrived, that confidence was shaken. At first, the experience felt frightening, but it also opened the door to a deeper understanding of God's presence. When human strength fades, we begin to notice how faithfully God supports us. The psalmist cried out for mercy, and the Lord responded with compassion. What began as a season of sorrow eventually became a testimony of restoration. This transformation did not erase the memory of the struggle, but it changed the meaning of the struggle. Pain that once seemed pointless became a pathway toward greater trust. The psalmist discovered that even in moments of weakness, God was shaping something beautiful within the soul. In the same way, our own difficult seasons may carry hidden seeds of growth. While we may not fully understand them now, God is quietly guiding our lives toward healing and wisdom. One of the gentle truths we learn from this psalm is that patience is part of the journey. Just as the dawn does not rush across the sky, emotional and spiritual healing often unfolds gradually. There may be small steps forward and moments when progress feels slow. Yet every small step matters. Every prayer, every moment of courage, every quiet act of faith becomes part of the story God is writing within us. When we remember this, the night becomes a little less frightening. Instead of seeing darkness as an enemy that will last forever, we begin to see it as a temporary chapter in a larger story. The same God who brought light into the world at the beginning of creation still brings light into human hearts today. His timing is gentle, wise, and full of care. If you are walking through a quiet season of waiting, allow yourself to breathe slowly and rest in God's presence. You do not need to force strength that you do not feel. God does not require perfect courage from us. What he welcomes is honesty and trust. Even a small prayer whispered in faith can reach heaven. Imagine again the slow arrival of morning. The sky begins to brighten with soft colors. The cool air carries the promise of a new day. In that moment, the long night begins to lose its power. In the same way, God's love is already bringing light into your life, even if the full sunrise has not yet appeared. The Lord who comforted the psalmist continues to comfort his children today. Hold gently to the promise that joy will return. The night will not last forever, and the morning of God's grace is already drawing near. There is a tender moment in every healing journey when the heart begins to feel lighter, even if the circumstances around us have not fully changed. It may begin with a small breath of peace, a quiet thought of hope, or a sudden reminder that we are not alone. Psalm 30 carries this gentle movement from sorrow toward restoration. The psalmist once cried out from a place of distress, yet over time he discovered that God was slowly lifting his spirit. The same God who heard his voice in the darkness also guided him into a season of gratitude. Many people expect healing to appear as a dramatic turning point, but often God works in softer ways. Instead of a sudden transformation, he offers steady comfort. One day you notice that the burden feels slightly easier to carry. Another day you realize that fear no longer holds the same power it once did. These quiet changes are signs that the Lord is gently restoring the heart. Just as the sun rises gradually across the sky, God's grace often enters our lives step by step. The psalmist remembered a time when he felt secure and unshaken. Yet when challenges appeared, that sense of certainty disappeared. At first, the experience brought confusion and fear, but as he cried out to God, he began to see something deeper. The Lord had not abandoned him. Instead, God was teaching him to depend on a stronger foundation than his own strength. Through the struggle, the psalmist discovered that divine mercy was more reliable than any human confidence. This discovery transformed the way he viewed his life. What once felt like a season of loss slowly became a testimony of grace. The psalmist realized that God had protected him even in moments when he felt most vulnerable. His sorrow had not been ignored. His prayers had not been forgotten. The Lord had been listening the entire time, preparing a future that would replace mourning with joy. When we reflect on this message, we begin to see our own struggles in a different light. The difficult nights we experience do not erase God's love for us. Instead, they often become places where His compassion shines more clearly. During those quiet hours of weakness, God's presence draws closer than we expect. He walks beside us with patience, offering strength when we feel unable to continue on our own. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not the removal of hardship, but the transformation of the heart within it. When God touches our lives, fear slowly becomes courage. Sadness begins to soften into peace. Gratitude grows where bitterness once lived. This is the kind of healing that Psalm 30 celebrates. It is a healing that reaches deeper than circumstances and renews the spirit itself. If you have been carrying a heavy heart, remember that God is able to lift what feels impossible for us to carry alone. You may not feel the change immediately, but His work is already beginning. Every prayer you whisper, every moment you choose to trust, opens your life to the gentle movement of His grace. Over time, the burdens that once seemed overwhelming will begin to loosen their hold. Picture the moment when morning sunlight finally fills a room that was once dark. The light does not struggle to enter. It simply arrives and spreads warmth everywhere it touches. In the same way, God's love enters the human heart with quiet power. When His presence fills our lives, despair slowly gives way to peace. Psalm 30 reminds us that sorrow never has the final word. The Lord who lifted the psalmist from his distress is still lifting hearts today. Even now, He is guiding your story toward a brighter morning. The tears of the night are real, but they will not last forever. In time, joy will rise again, and your heart will discover new reasons to sing. There comes a quiet point in the journey of healing when the heart begins to remember gratitude again. It may feel surprising at first. After nights filled with worry or sorrow, the soul slowly discovers small reasons to give thanks. Psalm 30 carries this beautiful movement from distress to praise. The psalmist once cried out in desperation, asking God for mercy and help. Yet as time passed, his voice changed. The same lips that once trembled with fear began to speak words of thanksgiving. This transformation reminds us that God not only hears our cries, but also restores joy to our spirits. Gratitude often grows slowly, like a flower opening in the early morning light. When pain has been heavy, it can take time for the heart to trust happiness again. Yet God understands this process. He does not rush our healing or demand instant strength. Instead, he patiently walks with us through each stage of recovery. As his presence becomes clearer, the soul begins to notice gentle gifts that were hidden during the darker days. A peaceful moment, a kind word, a quiet sense that life still carries beauty. These small blessings become the first signs that the morning of joy is drawing near. The psalmist experienced this change deeply. After pleading with God for help, he discovered that the Lord had turned his mourning into dancing. This poetic image reveals how completely God can transform the human heart. What once felt heavy and sorrowful can become light and full of life again. The same heart that once felt trapped in sadness can learn to celebrate once more. This does not mean that the memory of pain disappears. Instead, the pain becomes part of a larger story that now includes healing and gratitude. One of the most comforting truths in Psalm 30 is that God's anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. This message reassures us that the Lord's deepest desire is not to condemn, but to restore. Even when we walk through difficult seasons, God's love continues to surround us. His discipline may guide us, and his wisdom may correct us, but his ultimate purpose is always renewal. The heart of God is filled with compassion, and his grace is stronger than any moment of sorrow. As the psalmist reflected on his rescue, he felt compelled to praise God openly. Gratitude overflowed from his heart because he knew the Lord had lifted him from despair. This response teaches us something important about spiritual healing. When we remember how God has helped us in the past, our faith becomes stronger for the future. Each testimony of grace becomes a reminder that the Lord is faithful in every season. Perhaps you are beginning to notice small signs of healing in your own life. Maybe the burden you once carried feels slightly lighter. Maybe your thoughts are a little calmer than they were before. These gentle changes are not accidents. They are often the quiet work of God's presence within you. The same God who comforted the psalmist is still comforting hearts today. Take a moment to breathe deeply and reflect on the goodness that still surrounds your life. Even in difficult seasons, God leaves traces of his kindness everywhere. The warmth of sunlight, the comfort of a peaceful moment, the support of a caring friend, each of these can become a reminder that you are not forgotten. God continues to weave hope into your story. As gratitude grows within the heart, something beautiful begins to happen. Fear loses its grip, and trust becomes stronger. The soul realizes that even though nights of sorrow may come, they do not last forever. Morning always returns, and with it comes the gentle joy that only God can give. There are moments in life when the soul feels worn from long seasons of waiting. Even after the hardest nights begin to pass, the heart may still feel fragile and uncertain. Psalm 30 speaks gently into these moments, reminding us that God does more than remove sorrow. He restores strength to those who have grown weary. The psalmist did not simply return to the life he once knew. Instead, he discovered a deeper confidence rooted in God's faithfulness. When we walk through hardship, something within us changes. At first, that change can feel uncomfortable. The struggles we face may shake the stability we once relied upon. Yet through those very experiences, God quietly reshapes our inner lives. The psalmist once believed that his life stood firm on its own foundation. But when difficulty came, he realized that true stability is found only in the presence of God. This realization did not weaken him. Instead, it became the source of a stronger and more lasting faith. God often uses difficult seasons to teach us gentle strength. This kind of strength is different from the loud confidence the world often celebrates. It is quiet, patient, and deeply rooted in trust. Gentle strength does not pretend that pain never existed. Instead, it acknowledges the wounds while still believing that healing is possible. It is the strength that allows a person to continue walking forward even when the path is uncertain. The psalmist discovered that God was able to transform weakness into resilience. When he cried out for help, the Lord responded with compassion. Over time, the fear that once filled his heart began to fade. In its place grew a calm assurance that God would continue guiding him through every season. This new strength was not built on circumstances, but on the steady character of God. We can see this same pattern in our own lives. After a difficult season, we often look back and realize that we have become stronger in ways we did not expect. The experiences that once seemed overwhelming begin to reveal hidden lessons. We discover courage we did not know we possessed. We recognize that God carried us through moments when we felt unable to stand on our own. This realization brings a quiet sense of gratitude. Instead of viewing the past only through the lens of pain, we begin to see the grace that was present along the way. God was working even when we felt lost. His guidance was steady even when our vision was unclear. Each step forward, no matter how small, became part of a larger story of restoration. The psalmist eventually reached a place where his heart overflowed with praise. He recognized that God had not only rescued him from distress, but had also renewed his spirit. What began as a cry for help became a song of gratitude. The transformation was so profound that he could hardly remain silent. His soul wanted to thank the Lord continually. In the same way, God invites us to experience this gentle restoration. When we place our trust in Him, He begins rebuilding the areas of our lives that once felt broken. Fear slowly loosens its grip. Confidence returns in quiet and steady ways. We learn that our strength does not come from our own ability to control every situation. Instead, it comes from resting in the faithful presence of God. If you are still recovering from a difficult season, remember that healing takes time. The heart does not instantly forget the nights of sorrow it has endured. Yet each new day brings fresh opportunities for renewal. With every sunrise, God continues His work within you. The same Lord who lifted the psalmist from despair is still restoring strength today. His compassion has not changed, and His promises remain true. Even now, He is gently rebuilding your heart, preparing you to walk forward with quiet courage and lasting peace. There is a gentle moment in every journey with God when the heart begins to rediscover praise. It may come quietly at first, like the first rays of sunlight touching the horizon after a long night. Psalm 30 beautifully describes this transformation. The psalmist once cried out in distress, yet later his voice became a song of gratitude. His sorrow did not disappear without meaning. Instead, God used the experience to awaken a deeper awareness of divine mercy. When a person walks through seasons of hardship, the heart often becomes quiet. Words feel difficult, and even prayer may seem heavy. Yet God understands those silent moments. He does not require constant strength or perfect faith. Instead, He meets us gently where we are. As time passes and healing begins to take root, something remarkable happens within the soul. The quiet silence slowly turns into reflection, and reflection begins to grow into gratitude. The psalmist expressed this change by declaring that God had turned his mourning into dancing. This powerful image shows how completely God can transform human sorrow. Dancing represents freedom, movement, and joy. It is the opposite of the stillness that grief often brings. Through God's mercy, the psalmist discovered that his season of sadness would not last forever. The Lord lifted the heaviness from his heart and replaced it with a renewed spirit of praise. This transformation teaches us that praise is not simply an emotional reaction to good circumstances. True praise grows from recognizing God's faithfulness in every season. Even when life has been difficult, remembering how God carried us through those moments can awaken gratitude within our hearts. Praise becomes a response to grace rather than a reaction to comfort. In many ways, praise is a form of healing. When we thank God for His goodness, our attention shifts away from the darkness that once surrounded us. Our hearts begin to see the quiet miracles that were present all along. We remember the strength we received when we felt weak. We recall the moments when hope appeared unexpectedly. Each memory becomes a reminder that God never abandoned us during the night. The psalmist promised that his heart would sing to God and not remain silent. This declaration reveals a deep desire to honor the Lord for His faithfulness. Gratitude naturally seeks expression. Sometimes it appears in spoken words of prayer. Other times it emerges through acts of kindness, worship, or quiet reflection. However it is expressed, praise becomes a beautiful testimony of God's work in our lives. As we reflect on this message, we can also ask ourselves a gentle question. Where do we see God's faithfulness in our own stories? Perhaps it appears in the strength that carried us through a difficult season. Perhaps it is found in the comfort of a supportive friend, or the peace that arrived during a moment of prayer. These simple experiences are reminders that God is always near. The journey from sorrow to praise does not happen instantly. It unfolds slowly, just like the coming of morning. Yet every step toward gratitude is a step toward deeper healing. When the heart begins to thank God again, it also begins to trust Him more fully. Psalm 30 invites us to live with this spirit of grateful remembrance. Even after the night of weeping, the morning of joy will arrive. And when it does, our hearts will naturally want to sing. There is a quiet beauty that appears after a long night has finally passed. The world feels different when the morning arrives. The air seems lighter, the light feels warmer, and the heart begins to breathe more easily again. Psalm 30 gently guides us into this moment of renewal. The psalmist, who once cried out from deep distress, now stands in the light of God's mercy, recognizing that the Lord has faithfully carried him through the darkness. One of the most powerful lessons from this psalm is the understanding that night and morning are both part of life's journey. The psalmist did not deny that sorrow had visited his life. He openly remembered the tears and the fear that once surrounded him. Yet he also discovered that those painful moments were not the end of his story. God's grace was quietly working, even while the night seemed long. When morning finally came, the psalmist could look back and see how the Lord had been guiding him the entire time. This reflection encourages us to see our own lives with a wider perspective. When we are in the middle of difficulty, it is easy to believe that the darkness will never end. Our thoughts may become heavy with uncertainty, and hope can feel distant. Yet Psalm 30 reminds us that God's timing is always faithful. The Lord does not forget the cries of His people. Even when His answer seems delayed, His compassion remains active and present. Living in the light after the night means remembering what God has done. The psalmist chose to keep gratitude alive in his heart. He promised that he would praise the Lord continually and not remain silent about God's goodness. This commitment reveals an important truth. Gratitude protects the joy that God restores. When we remember how God helped us in the past, our faith becomes stronger for the future. Another beautiful lesson from this psalm is the transformation of identity that takes place through God's mercy. The psalmist was no longer defined by the sorrow he had experienced. Instead, he became someone who could testify about God's faithfulness. His story changed from one of despair to one of praise. What once felt like a season of defeat became a living reminder of God's restoring power. In our own lives, God offers the same transformation. The struggles we endure do not have to define us forever. Through His grace, even painful chapters can become testimonies of healing. When we trust God during the night, we eventually discover that the morning carries unexpected gifts. Strength grows where weakness once lived. Compassion deepens within the heart. Gratitude rises where fear once stood. Living in the light also means walking forward with renewed trust. The psalmist understood that life would still contain challenges, yet his confidence had changed. He now knew that God's presence would remain steady through every future season. This assurance allowed him to live with peace rather than constant fear. Perhaps you are just beginning to see the first light after your own difficult night. If so, take a moment to breathe and acknowledge how far you have come. The journey may not have been easy, but God has been beside you throughout it. Every step forward is evidence of His quiet faithfulness. The message of Psalm 30 continues to echo through every generation. Weeping may stay for the night, but joy comes in the morning. As you walk into the light of this new day, may your heart remember that God's love is constant. The night has passed, and His grace is leading you forward. As we come to the end of this reflection on Psalm 30, let us pause and breathe in the gentle promise that has carried us through every part of this journey. The message of the psalm remains simple yet deeply comforting. Weeping may last for the night, but joy comes with the morning. Life often brings seasons that feel dark and uncertain. There are nights when the heart grows tired, when prayers seem quiet, and when hope feels distant. Yet, even in those moments, God's presence does not disappear. The psalmist discovered that the Lord listens with compassion and responds with mercy. When he cried out from his distress, God lifted him from the depths of sorrow and restored his strength. Mourning was slowly turned into dancing, and silence became a song of gratitude. This beautiful transformation reminds us that God's love is always moving within our lives, even when we cannot immediately see the change. If you are walking through a difficult season today, remember that the night is only part of the story. God is still writing the morning. His grace is quietly working in places your eyes cannot yet see. The tears you have shed are known to Him, and the prayers you have whispered are never ignored. Let us end with a gentle prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for walking with us through both the night and the morning of life. When our hearts feel weary, remind us that your love never fades. When we feel surrounded by darkness, help us trust that your light is already on the way. Fill our hearts with peace, restore our strength, and teach us to rest in your faithful care each day. May every new morning remind us of your mercy and awaken gratitude within our souls. If this reflection has blessed your heart, may you continue seeking God each day and sharing His hope with others. Amen.